And that's pretty much it. So again, I'm Brian. I live in South Florida. I have an office in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. My practice is limited to family law. I know what you're all probably wondering. Are we wearing pants? The answer to that question will be given to you in 2 weeks at the next episode. Unless, Melissa, you really want to answer it today, but I don't think you should because we will lose people.
No. And I chose to have orange juice today and not any adult beverage this afternoon.
That's responsible. Me too.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole reason why we decided to create this platform, this collaboration, is because, we've started using technology even more. We always have, but we're using it a ton more now that we're all working from home. And so it felt like the right time. It's something that we had been talking about for quite a while. And so this platform, Tech Talk Law, is just going to be a collaboration amongst anyone who's involved in the law profession to help talk about technology and how it creates a more efficient law practice. We won't profess to be tech experts, but we do say that we use technology, so we'll share our good and bad with you, and we hope that in turn you share the same with us so that we can all learn from one another.
And now that I'm doing my first actual webinar on Zoom, I get to see little pictures of everybody, and I am enthralled by my friend Ryan's Tiger King background over there. Hi, Ryan. That's it. Okay.
So the topic of the day.
Video mediation. Okay. So for the next one of these, we're going to be having a poll set up. We haven't had a chance to integrate it fully yet. But for right now, we're going to talk about video mediations. So what is a video mediation? Essentially, it's the same thing as an in-person mediation, but with a lot more hiccups and a lot more things that could possibly go wrong. Okay. There's various technologies that can be used during this time frame. I'm personally still getting emails left and right from local mediators who want to continue mediating in person. Melissa, are you getting those?
Yes, absolutely. But I think for the most part, everyone around here is saying, no, we're not going to risk it. It's just not worth it.
So, and I think those of us who've actually started to use video services like Zoom more regularly, you realize how easy it is. And frankly, being a mediator myself, as well as a litigator, and having done in-person as well as Zoom, I'm starting to see a lot more benefits that are even coming out of video mediations, as well as video hearings, which are really starting to take off in our jurisdictions. The judges don't really know how to do them yet. God help them, they're going to get there. But one of the things I'm seeing right away is people seem to be more comfortable. It's scary when someone shows up in the office and they're the clients there, the lawyers are there. People now can mediate or be in court right from their own home or their sofa, or they don't have to worry about necessarily childcare the same way. Have you run into any difficulties yet, and how are you doing your mediations, Melissa?
So far, so good. I will say that, I've been doing this for quite a while just because I work with a lot of international clients who they can't come into the country. It's not easy or inexpensive or immigration reasons or criminal arrest warrants or all that fun stuff that they can't come in. So I've been doing this for a good long time. And the technology has gotten better. Things seem a little more clear. It seems like I'm looking more at you as opposed to down at my keyboard. The connectivity issues are a lot better. So I think it's a lot more seamless for them. I think we're just all using technology a lot more than we were 10 years ago when I started doing this. So, hopefully we can keep integrating technology, but of course that's video conferencing. When we talk about online dispute resolution or virtual mediation, it encompasses a whole wide range of different technology that's beyond just video conferencing. So this is, of course, is Zoom, which is the probably most highly downloaded app in the most recent weeks in the United States or globally, because we are now using it for everything from webinars to social coffee hours or happy hours to mediation or consults with our clients. And of course, everything related to technology has not just hiccups, but also security concerns and other things that might be potentially burdensome or difficult or concerning to lawyers. So I'm not sure if, Brian, you've had any experience with video conferencing technology and what concerns might have been raised to you. I mean, are people willing to use it? Are they expressing to you privacy concerns? Do you have any concerns about, I guess, confidentiality, attorney-client privilege, things like that?
So I think that there's several concerns that need to be addressed. One of the, I think the biggest right now are those individuals who don't know how to use it. I have tried to do certain video conferences, and for those that are not overly tech savvy, I'm running into problems with people being able to connect and spending a considerable amount of time teaching how to do that. Now, it's not necessarily just the video sharing that I'm having the problems with. It's the screen sharing aspect. And the screen sharing aspect is very important when you're dealing with a mediation or a court hearing or even just an interpersonal meeting. Some of the things that have to happen, for instance, is if you're going to share your screen or you need to see somebody else's screen, you need to have certain administrative privileges to open up your computer. Okay? You may not know your password. You may not know your username. What has to happen is you really need to test these out in advance as best you can. Have a dummy session with a friend. Go through the things that you want to do. Practice your screen sharing. It seems intuitive, and it is intuitive once you know how to do it. But if you haven't done it, that first round can have hiccups. There's also, you may have pop-up blockers. There's any number of things. So I highly recommend testing it out. The other issue that I've seen is for all of us that are in our homes and have children or barking dogs, ensuring that you have a quiet setup, because I'll hear downstairs the footsteps and things going. And I made the very wise decision to try to teach my kids who are too young to play the piano how to play the piano. And so now I have this piano thing going. And so, it's very important to ensure that you have a quiet area, A, because you need to hear what's going on, B, because it looks unprofessional if you don't, and C, you don't want to scare anybody that there's a third party listening or a third party present, because now you're going to have privacy issues.
Right. I mean, that's the headline everyone's been seeing within the past couple of days, is that they are, people jumping onto Zoom calls because people are sharing their private meeting IDs or even their public meeting IDs on websites or social media and, churches or whatnot. People jump on and they start, sending out nasty grams or vulgar words or worse. So, I mean, that is an issue, especially when you're talking about mediation, because it's a confidential process. And it's not even just that with the technology, but it's how do you know that I'm sitting here looking at you, but that behind my computer is not someone else standing there where I haven't disclosed that they're participating in the mediation. My agreement to mediate says they shall not do that. They shall not include third parties without my permission and permission of everyone else participating in mediation. But how do I actually confirm that they do that? And, I also put in there mandates that you're not recording these mediation sessions without the permission of everyone else. If this is confidential, who knows where that recording is going to go or what courthouse it's going to end up in? I mean, when you have the technology, there are more things that can happen that can breach the confidentiality besides just you being unfamiliar with the technology that you're using.
And speaking of that, so I have a question here from Lindsay Parvis. She wants to know if locking the session can prevent Zoom bombing. I think that you can lock the Zoom session and make it a private event. That said, I do not know if they've completely been able to put up some kind of firewall that blocks people from intruding. I don't think they have yet.
Right. So I think Zoom has put out some principles that it thinks everyone should abide by now. Use passwords, don't share it with other people, put everyone in the waiting room at the outset so that you have to personally, you as the host, admit the people, so you can choose not to admit someone that you think might not be kosher and, a part of your group. That's really difficult when you have 100 people joining in and you're not sure who everyone is for a webinar. But for a mediation session, you should absolutely know who the people are that are participating in your mediation session. You should have sent them a specific invitation. You should have sent one with a password, and then you should put them in the waiting room so that they're all joining at the same exact time so that you know who's there and who's not. hopefully they have not shared this password with other people. So hopefully there's a little more security in that way.
Yeah, and that waiting room is exactly what I did for today in setting up this webinar. So for those of you who don't know, you can require your attendees to go through a waiting room and you have to manually admit them. So certainly look at the names, look at the email addresses. You can see the contacts. For our webinars, we require registration in advance so that we can monitor and make sure that there's nobody inappropriate who's joining these. And there were a couple of registrations that we weren't sure about. And so we explored them. Your mediation should do the same thing. You'll be able to see if that password is shared and there's a login from somewhere else. Sometimes it'll show you you're logged in twice, okay? And if you see that, that's something you should be questioning. Why are you logged in twice? Is there somebody else there? The other thing you're going to want to find out is maybe somebody isn't logging in separately, but the Zoom window is only so big. Is there a parent? Is there a relative? Is there a friend sitting 5 feet over from the individual listening to all of this? Are we required to ask participants in a mediation, is there anybody else present? Is that an issue?
So that's where that agreement to mediate comes in my mind. So I have a very lengthy, probably almost too lengthy agreement to mediate that I send out in advance. So I'm doing a remote mediation. I actually send it out by DocuSign. So talking about other technology besides video conferencing that you can use for your online mediations. These electronic signature platforms, granted, some of them you may need to pay for. And of course, sometimes the paid subscriptions are actually better. They have better privacy policies, whereas you use the free Skype session and Skype might be recording your otherwise what you think is a confidential session. So you need to read the privacy policies of the platforms you're using. And the same holds true with any technology. But I send out these agreements to mediate in advance to the people, at least 24 hours in advance if I can, preferably a lot longer, because I want them to read it very carefully and let me know if they have questions. And send it back to me by DocuSign, which is wonderful. You can put both of their email addresses in and it sends me the full document once both of them sign electronically, and then I can countersign and send it back. I actually use hellosign.com to do that. So I can then send it back to them by email and everyone has the fully executed agreement to mediate. And I include in their language that you shall not record, that you shall not have third parties present, that technology has inherent risks, and that they recognize that privacy policies may allow for certain platforms to record. And, it's not the intention that this would be not confidential, and they are still agreeing that they're not going to take anything to court and use it, even if for some reason there's an inadvertent breach of confidentiality. So, for all of that, I try to get it in contract at the beginning. The other thing, of course, and Brian, correct me if you're wrong, the question is how do you get paid? So that's something I need to work out at the beginning as well. And especially when you're doing it remotely, you can't just say, here, give me a credit card or hand me a check. That's where some technology also comes in handy.
So let me go back 1 second on your letter that you're doing. Do you include any exculpatory language now that if you're using Zoom, let's say, that you can't guarantee the privacy, and you can't get, we can use best efforts and there's encoding and encryption done within Zoom, but we can't control if there's somebody hacks in. I mean, do you have any disclaimers like that? And if not, do you think we need to?
So, I mean, I've always had a disclaimer. I've always used Zoom. So I've always put a link right in my agreement to mediate to their privacy policy, so that I know I've given them a copy of the privacy policy. They can read it and inform themselves. But I put right in there that I can't guarantee the confidentiality because of whatever Zoom may or may not be doing in that regard. And that came about years ago when online mediators actually stopped using Skype, because Skype started recording sessions without the mediators knowing. And the European Union had heightened privacy laws that went into place. And so all of their mediators immediately said, we're not using Skype anymore. Now, I can't say that Skype hasn't changed or that a paid version of Skype might not be proper. Just read the privacy policies. There's a ton of video platforms. I just happen to use Zoom, but GoToMeeting, BlueJeans, there's a lot of different video platforms, but I do include it in my agreement to mediate and always have.
So I'm getting some questions about the language that goes into the mediator's letter that you send out. What I've suggested is, in the interest of time, everyone, we have a website that's going to be launching very soon, hopefully by the end of the week. And maybe what we can do is create a blog post for you guys with some ideas that can go into this mediator's letter, and feel free to use it and share and comment, and we can all work together. You know, everyone's doing this as a matter of first impression. So we're happy to do that. You were asking me about other software, Melissa, and things that we use. So
ensuring you're paid.
yeah, to get paid. So what I've done is, so I've recently built a standalone website for mediation. It's called videosettle.com. And what I've incorporated in mine is all the software that I want to use to have everything in one place. So what does that mean? I get people that email me or call me or text me, hey, I need dates for mediation. One of the things that I did was I tied my calendar into a booking tool right on Video Settle. So anybody can go in and actually see my availability, and with the caveat that it still has to be approved. The last thing you want in the world, which is one of my concerns, is I may be available on a certain day to mediate, and then an opposing counsel in one of my litigation cases wants to be a jerk, goes and sees I'm available on a certain date, and then turns around and sets like a 2-day trial. You know, just because I may be able to mediate on a certain day, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily available to go to a trial on a certain day. So I have a confirmation process that I do. In terms of payment, the other thing I did was, you got to think about the different options. So you can use Zelle or Venmo, but you got to be careful because a lot of business accounts will not use and will not tie into Venmo or Zelle. And if that doesn't work, then you got to deal with something like Stripe, a PayPal account. What I've done is my office, we use LawPay. And LawPay is pretty technologically savvy, and they have what's called an API. And you can take the link for your payment page and stick it wherever you want. You can email them the link. You can have, and I have it on my firm website, and I have it on Video Settle, where you literally just click the link. It's set up to go right in the account, and it's one stop. They fill it all out. They handle credit cards. They handle everything. And it's all done in one place. I can get the confirmation. I know it's done. Now, one of the things that I've not done, and this may depend on jurisdiction, I always thought it would be nice to have a way to have credit cards available to be paid and sign up to be paid in advance, because there's nothing worse at the end of that mediation to have to start hitting people up for these large numbers. I think
especially when you're not sitting in the same room and they can easily just ignore you, like leave meeting. Goodbye.
Right, and right, exactly, and it's hard to do that and go back and forth. So that's something I'm exploring right now, and I would love to hear from other people if we do another discussion on this, how you deal with payments at this time. You know, the mechanisms are there, but the semantics on how to do it, that's what I'm not sure about. And I just got another question asking about taking a deposit. So for instance, you hold a 4-hour deposit for mediation, holding a trust. I have a hard enough time sending out my confidentiality letters in advance and getting them sent back to me. Nobody pays attention. So I think it's great in theory. I think it's something you can ask for. The question is, if you don't get those funds, are you going to not mediate? How much do you enforce it? I think a lot of this is going to be trial and error. And frankly, I've had a couple of situations where at the end of a mediation, I have a problem, I'm getting paid. And so far, every single time the lawyer representing them has helped. Usually it's not an issue. So I think it's also a bigger concern if you wind up mediating for pro se's. That's going to put you in a whole nother realm of the problem.
Right. So I've actually in the past asked for credit card numbers up front that I would hold in my files. However, that raises a whole other host of privacy concerns, holding on to people's confidential credit card numbers, that I don't want to accidentally have it go on my cloud drive. And what if it's on my cloud drive and I'm hacked for some reason? Then I'm responsible for someone's credit card number being out there. So I've been toying with the ideas of flat fees. I'll do a 3-hour session, but you're paying me a flat fee and you're paying it up front before the session can begin. And, I've not had problems in the past when I've asked for upfront fees or upfront deposits. But I need to just be realistic. I'm not asking for, 20 hours worth of my time as a retainer, but a 4-hour deposit, if I think a 4-hour mediation is what we're really going to do, then I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's something you could experiment with. I mean, the worst case scenario is that the attorneys or the clients say no, they're not willing to do it. In which case then you just, you come up with another option. But I think that is a significant issue. I have another question here, and I'm just jumping around as we do it, about switching between virtual rooms. Okay.
So caucus mediation when you're going back and forth and shuttling.
How have you handled that? Because not everyone knows. I know some, I've heard some stories where the mediator is disconnecting the session, calling the other side,
Yeah.
disconnecting, calling the other side. I have a premium Zoom account where I can have virtual rooms. And the reason I wanted that is because I'm going to have two separate rooms at least when I'm doing this. And I'm going to have room A and room B. And room A may have client, lawyer, forensic accountant. And what I need to have happen is I need to make sure, for instance, if the forensic accountant is working with schedules, I need that accountant to be able to take those schedules, put them on the screen, share them with me, share them with his room, because everybody's in different rooms. Um, I think that the better way to do this is through virtual rooms when you can do it, as opposed to having separate Zoom sessions. What do you think, Melissa?
Right. So I know Zoom has this feature called breakout rooms that it allows. I'm not as familiar with other platforms and whether they have a similar feature. My understanding of the breakout rooms, yet I have not tested it, is that when the mediator leaves one breakout room and the lawyer and client may be talking amongst themselves, they can actually flag an alert to the mediator saying, hey, we need your attention, so the mediator can then go back, as opposed to having the mediator just jump back in the middle of a confidential conversation. It can be clunky until you get used to it, but I think you're eventually going to get used to it if you do it enough. The other concern, of course, is that even as you, the mediator, get used to this, you're going to have others that are not as familiar with the technology, and you, the mediator, are now saying, hey, you want to mediate? We're doing it remotely and we're using Zoom. And does that seem fair if the other parties are going, well, we'll try it, but we're not that comfortable using it. And now you're imposing all this, technology on me. So you have to kind of meet people where they are in that way. But yes, caucus, a very important component of a lot of mediations.
So when you, now one of the alternatives is with Zoom, if I have somebody or any of these platforms, if you have someone who's not able to get the video or connectivity drops out, instead of the mediation ending, you do have the option to jump on the phone. And the user can simply dial a phone number and be in the exact same room, which is one of the great features. So even if there's no internet, they can take their cell phone, an office phone, a house phone, and dial that direct number, and they can still be there on the line. You just lose the visual at that time. But I think that helps. So what about with virtual mediations? One of the concerns that I've had recently is crossing borders. Um,
Mm.
you know, in Florida, when I got certified to become a mediator, there must have been 40 people in the room, and I would say 3 of us were lawyers. I had somebody who worked for the EPA in New Jersey who liked to spend 2 weeks down here and figured while she was down here, she could try to mediate a case to pay for her trip. Almost anybody can mediate. How is that going to come into play, you think, with cross borders? Is there going to be borders when you have ADR online?
Right. So I've been debating this for a good long time, specifically in the ethics issues, because when I mediate, I'm often sitting in DC and one party's in Washington state and the other party's in Norway. And what law applies to me? What standards do I abide by for my mediation? What confidentiality laws apply? I put all of that into my agreement to mediate, saying this is a confidential process. You agree to this. We're abiding by the Maryland standards for mediator conduct. Here's a link to the standards. I put all of that in my agreement to mediate. They all sign it. They all read it. They all say they understand it. But does that really matter if Norway then says, nope, we're going to require you to turn over your mediation notes. We're going to require possible testimony in Washington state, whatever it might be. When you're in the cross-border situation and you're not familiar with all of the laws and all of the rules and all the jurisdictions, it gets really dicey. So you just protect yourself the best you can. At least that's where I'm sitting right now, and hoping for the best and have your malpractice insurance paid up and all of that good stuff. But no, I can see that there are going to need to be certain new principles put in place. The AFCC and ABA, they have practice guidelines for mediators, model standards for family mediators. And there's some talk amongst folks in the online dispute resolution realm, updating those to include different ethics and professionalism standards for family mediators who handle ODR cases.
Well, and I know in Florida there was talk for a long time, and I don't think it's gone through yet. I could be wrong, but there was a bill proposed, a rule, I should say, of civil procedure for us that was going to require training to even be a mediator. You know, right now you don't even have to be trained where we are. You know,
No,
mediate.
no. The certification usually is only affiliated with the court. If you mediate for a court in a particular U.S. jurisdiction, that's usually who dictates if you have certain background criteria. But otherwise, Joe down the street can go out and say, I'm a mediator.
Yeah. So, I think that all of this, again, it goes with this learning curve that we're all talking about. So to summarize so far, what we need is we got to make sure we have an infrastructure set up, which is a quiet place to be, a secure place to be. You got to have certain softwares in place. Do you need to have a calendar booking app? You don't. Do you need to have a video service of some kind? You should. Could you do this as a group FaceTime and go back and forth? Yes, I think that would probably be cumbersome. The idea is to have software for the video that's going to make it as easy and user-friendly for individuals as possible. We talked about signing of agreements. You can use DocuSign, Adobe. One of the things that I've recently applied for is becoming an online notary. That's another thing that timeliness, speaking of, this came down the pipeline not too long ago that you can have online notarization. What I have found in my state, it's a pain in the ass. I had applied, I had everything lined up to have it, and they wound up sending it back to me because I had to go through a third party to go to the state to get a special certificate to send back to the bonding company, to send back to me, for me to send back to the state. And I'm still waiting for that. So, I would suggest that anybody who's interested in becoming an online notary start the process pretty soon. Now, not every agreement, I think it depends on jurisdiction, not every agreement has to be notarized, but certain ones do. If you're transferring property, if there's something you're doing, you do not want to be in a situation where you have an executed settlement agreement that maybe isn't finalized because the parties have to go to a bank or they have to go to a place to get a document notarized, and there's nowhere to do it because everything is shut down. So have you dealt with that? Have you been dealing with anything with online notaries yet?
Well, some jurisdictions, including Maryland, where I practice, I think have a specific order right now limited to the duration of the stay-at-home pandemic orders that were issued by the state, where Maryland notaries can now serve in an online capacity. I think a lot of other states are doing that, but that's only a limited term situation. So the question is does your particular jurisdiction allow for e-notaries? And I know some jurisdictions do, and they have for a while, but it's a certain process. And the question I had, and I don't know the answer to it, is if, say, I'm a Virginia notary, can I notarize a document for a man in Brazil? Or do I have to notarize a document for another person who's sitting in Virginia? Or can I notarize a document for someone in Brazil if the document's going to be used in Virginia in a court proceeding? I mean, there are a whole lot of rules that you need to look into depending on the jurisdiction, and questions that you need to be asking before you even have a client or parties in a mediation execute something with an online notary.
And that's true because there are significant differences in those rules. When I was applying for mine, it does advise you where does the applicant have to be? What is the document? There was a lot of detail, and I'm having people chime in that. So Stacy from Washington, Stacy Hurd, my friend, is saying that it's easy. So I would certainly explore this wherever you guys are, and if it's not a difficult process, get it. It can't hurt if it's something, even if it's not for mediation. For anything else, it's certainly handy to have that. I don't know that you're necessarily going to open up the side hustle of being an online notary, but you never know. Nate had a question about the flat fees, going back a little bit. And this is a good point. What he said is, let's say you ask somebody to pay a 3 or 4 hour flat fee, but the mediation turns out like it to be 2 hours. Are you going to find that parties or lawyers are stretching it out to try to get their money's worth, or are they going to feel pressure that they have to, do certain items? When you did that, a flat fee, Melissa, is it refundable?
No, it's a flat fee. No. Okay. I mean, you have to make a very strategic decision for your own practice, whether it's reasonable to do a flat fee and for how much. Usually a flat fee would be less than what that number of hours would be at your hourly rate. And, that's just a business decision you need to make. And if that's what you decide to do and people don't want to use you as the mediator, they'll find someone else. Um, the
Scared of flat
other,
fees.
you
I,
go
I
back to the retainer. You go back to the retainer idea, the deposit.
I don't do flat fees in my practice either very often. Once in a blue moon for a very specific item, but other than that, I find that people want to bleed with your own blood and draw things out. And so one of the things having, and I'm even an advocate in a mediation. If you have um, the breadwinner and an impecunious spouse, I still like the idea of having both parties having at least a little bit of skin in the game. Even I've done even sometimes a 90-10 split on a mediation, just so somebody knows that their own dime is there and they need to be reasonable. I think that people tend to lose sight of the forest through the trees, and the lawyers are more expensive than the mediator. But just knowing that they're on a clock, I've noticed over the years, and even if it's my own client that I have the impecunious spouse, I do at times encourage them to have to pay some element of this fee for the purpose of them knowing that and having the incentive to get this done. And so, I think it all depends on if you're comfortable doing flat fees or you want to stick to hourly. I would say that an alternative, Nate, would be to have almost like a refundable deposit. If it's a full day mediation, maybe you want to take 6 hours or 8 hours, but it's refundable. They can pay it the morning of or the night before, and it doesn't really clear. And if it's an issue, you return it. There's probably other ways to do that as well if we think it through. And so that's how you would satisfy that, I think, if you didn't want to do the flat fee.
Yeah, please always share your thoughts. I think that's why Brian and I created this platform. We really want all of us to collaborate on what are best options for all of us. Another question, Brian, do you do intake for your mediations, a screening process before you take on a case?
I do. It's somewhat limited what I do. I obviously get information, the names, contact information for the parties and the lawyers. I try not to get very much directly from the parties themselves. I love when lawyers send me mediation summaries or documents in advance. I do it that way. I try not to do much beyond that because I never want to have an appearance of impropriety. So if I'm specifically asking for something and only one party gives it, I don't want the other side to think that there's a disadvantage. But when it's voluntary, I prefer it. I think that I can hit the ground running, and I almost have an idea as to where the case has to settle before I even start.
So for most cases, I love when there are lawyers involved, if they're the right lawyers, of course. But I've gotten a lot of mediation recently where it's just the two parties. And so I've been doing pre-mediation screening phone calls. I have them schedule on a scheduling app. I use Calendly. And I have them do a 15-minute call with me, each of them. They both know that the calls are confidential, because I find when people are coming to me and they haven't pre-screened themselves, they might be feeling, I have no options but to go to mediation because I don't have money to do anything else. They might feel pressured into mediation by the other person in the mediation. So I want to screen them in that regard. But there's also, and what I'm starting to try to build is, online intake forms. There are a variety of technology options, jot form, type form, all of this, where you can actually build online intake forms where you give the person a link in advance and they fill it out. And in fact, that's what online dispute resolution, how it started. I mean, it started many years ago with companies like eBay and PayPal, where they created these essentially forms where they figured out what the discrete issue was, and then they helped resolve it just through uses of platforms and things like that without any human interaction. Now, I'm not saying that for mediation necessarily, but if you can narrow issues by using advanced intake forms, whether it's, you do a screening tool on domestic violence or abuse, whether you just ask, do you need an interpreter and what language to fill out so that you can know that in advance. Ask them what technology they're familiar with, or, maybe you even gather more information than that in advance. Now, I grant this is probably cutting into your fee, but, provide them a form asking for a budget. Even if it's not filled out, they might start getting to think about, oh, well, I'm going to have to talk about what my budget is, or I'm going to have to talk about what holidays I want to spend with the kids. And the forms will start helping them, streamline that.
How specific do you get in your request? What do you ask them generally? What is it that you're looking for? What are the disputed issues? Are they general questions, or are they very direct questions?
So in the online intake form, it's, you know, more general. It's more open-ended, and it's more geared towards, is there an outstanding court order? Are there outstanding protective orders? Are there outstanding abuse and neglect cases in your particular situation? Do you need an interpreter? Things like that. When I do my 15-minute screening phone calls, more than not, it's just me telling them what mediation is, because I find a lot of people misunderstand mediation. And it's also me getting a sense of whether or not they're going to be okay with the format that we're using. If it's in person, if it's online, because if they're not going to be comfortable with doing online mediation right now, then we might want to delay mediating until we can mediate in person again. So it's more of a informational spiel. And I know some people just send out information emails. When someone contacts them, they have a canned email that they can auto send out to potential mediation clients with all this information. I like to do it in the 15-minute calls, because I find that even when I send an email, they don't read it all.
Right.
And so I can make sure that they're actually hearing what I'm saying, and that they're not thinking that I'm going to serve as some independent lawyer for both of them, that I'm really going to be a neutral and I'm only helping them facilitate a conversation.
So, yeah, and I think that would be helpful. That may be something that we do in another blog entry. Is we start giving out some of these ideas as to what people can put in for these intake forms. So at this point, one of the things that we spoke about that we didn't want to do is we didn't want to have these webinars go on and on and on. We're not fixing a time frame, but we want to make them enjoyable. And the other thing we want to do is have topics that everybody likes. We had a good turnout for this one. We didn't really start marketing this yet. We're going to. What I'm going to do later this week is we're going to send out an invitation for everybody to see our website, and I'm going to have a form on there for you to send us your topics of things that you would want to cover. What I'm going to send out in a minute too, right now, is mine and Melissa's email addresses. So we would love if you emailed us and told us things that you liked about this, things that you didn't like about it. Give us your feedback, things that you'd want to see, things you'd want to see changed. It would help us a long way. We have a couple weeks till our next episode. We have already had that one scheduled. Melissa, you want to tell everyone about the next one in 2 weeks on social media?
Yeah, in 2 weeks on April 21st at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So every other Tuesday at 3, you'll find us here, and we're going to be talking about marketing yourself and branding yourself using social media.
So one of the things that we like about this is, listen, we all go to CLE presentations. And as you know, CLEs have to be very substantive, okay? What we want to do is present topics that wouldn't necessarily qualify for CLE credit, but are ideas of things that we actually like and care about and need to know about, and things that are going to help us during this ongoing pandemic. And we're going to have a day. We talk about how's business, what are you doing to get business, what are you worried about with business down the road, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the emails are in the chat right there. And what is that, Melissa?
I just send out an additional link, mediate.com, for anyone who has been on that website. Not that I'm plugging them, but they have free articles on online dispute resolution there, and they're putting it up and updating it all the time. And something that I just signed up for, because there really isn't training for online dispute resolution, but they are starting to have some online dispute resolution training through mediate.com. So if you're interested in that type of thing, you can look at them.
Well, I am going to plug videosettle.com, the mediation booking service that I built, and everyone feel free to use it. And if anybody wants to incorporate it into their own practice, just reach out to me. I can help you do that. So again, emails are there. The website's going to be out. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And please, 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 we mean it. Please reach out to us. If you know us directly, text us, call us, email us. If you don't know us, do any of the same. Just be nice and don't be stalkerish. Right?
Oh, that sounds good.
All right. If there's no other questions, we're going to end this for today. And I wish everybody a great rest of the week.
Thanks. Stay healthy.
You too. Bye, Melissa.
Bye.